Hi, James Proctor here, and welcome back to part 3 of our 3-part webinar series. And we wrapped up the 3-part webinar, the live 3-part webinar, just a couple days ago. And so now I'm just creating a nice, cohesive, tight set of 3 videos here, and this is part 3 here. So in part 3, we're talking about running critical scenarios here. Let me get my pointer up going here. There we go, laser pointer. All right, running critical scenarios to validate requirements to support crew scheduling. So the concept here is, okay, back in part 1, well, let's actually just go, we'll talk about part 1, 2, and 3 here in just a second. But let's start off, as we always do, is the why is we here question, right? Why are we here? Better requirements. As business analysts, a big part of our job is to understand business requirements, business systems requirements, complete, unambiguous, validated requirements delivered faster, right? That's a great job of doing requirements. Now, I love doing requirements, but requirements are really, right, a waypoint along the way to better business systems. Effective functionality, great customer experiences, less maintenance intensive, delivered faster, and all those kinds of things. So the better job we do of getting the requirements right, the better job the technical teams can do, right, of getting the systems right. But building systems and deploying systems are just a waypoint to what we really want to do is achieve better business process, right? More effective, more efficient business process. And we'll have that discussion here in just a little bit about effectiveness and efficiency. But business process is where value is created. And so if we have great business process, we deliver great business, customer and business value, delighted stakeholders, all those kinds of things that create value for our organization and for our customers. Okay, so how are we going to do it? Well, we did a 3-part live webinar, and this is the recorded portion of it. So in part 1, we talked about data-oriented business rules. Right? We understand what are the kinds of things we need to know about, and what do we need to know about those things. And that we call it the business vocabulary, which created a firm foundation, right, for higher and better analysis. Now, and if you haven't watched part 1, I'd highly encourage you to look at part 1 before you do part 3 here. Now, in part 2, we said, okay, let's talk about business transactions, our business systems requirements. What are the things we need to do? And along with that, we talked about analytic requirements as well. So we identified and analyzed, right, our business systems requirements. Because that's really, there's 3 components to understanding, there's identifying, analyzing, and specifying requirements. So we talked about that in part 2. Now, here in part 3, we're talking about running some scenarios against our business processes and our business systems. Because what we really want to do is, things work well when things are working well, but what happens when our environment's not working so well, right? Heavy weather's moving in, right? It's getting worse, and flights are coming in late, and crews are getting rerouted to different flights and flight legs and things like that, and just all kinds of things are happening. And so what happens when all that happens? And I think the meltdown of the whole schedule, right, back in late December, early January, really, showed some cracks, if you will. And I got some hypotheses we'll share later in this video towards the end about what I think happened. All right, but let's move on. All right, so what we're going to do in part 3 here is I'm going to start off with talking about effectiveness, efficiency, and value creation. Because without understanding those 3 components, what does effectiveness mean, efficiency, and creating value, it's hard to start thinking about making decisions about things unless we understand, right, those 3 components. And that'll make sense here in just a minute. I'm going to talk about the SWA Value Triad. I found this in a particular article on how they view the concept of value creation and what drives decision making, particularly when things start melting down. So we'll talk about the Network Operating Center, and we'll talk about a special place in that Network Operating Center here in just a little bit. So what are some scenarios? So when we get into the meltdown, we'll talk about scenarios and maybe things we could do to mitigate those from a process and systems perspective. So stick around. This is a really, when we get there in about 15 more minutes, it's a really fun discussion we're going to have. All right. As we did in each one of the 3 videos, I encourage you to go to part 1 and part 2 first before you look at part 3. It'll make more sense. But we really look at 2 sides of the framework here, right? Transactionally, what are the things we need to do? Schedule flights, create crew, assign an aircraft, dispatch a flight leg, and 1,000 other things, right? And then we're analyzing, right, because those are verb nouns, schedule flight, create crew, and so on and so forth. Then we're asking, well, what does the nouns mean? What's a flight mean? What's a crew? What's an aircraft? What's a flight leg? Now, going all back to part one, I talked in depth about that because each one of these things, it took a lot of discussion. I had to do a lot of digging to find out what aircraft was pretty intuitive, but the rest of them, I had to really do some digging to find out what those meant. Now, normally, right, you'd have some knowledgeable subject matter experts. Not always. Hopefully you'd have some knowledgeable subject matter experts. But there's a tremendous, in anything you're analyzing, there's also a tremendous amount of external business domain that you can leverage on as well. All right, so that's that. We talked about the concept in part one and part two, and again in part three. It came down to the flight leg. That is like the most atomic level. A particular aircraft being assigned to a particular leg, Denver to Tulsa, for example, and a particular crew assigned to that particular leg. Right? Everything else is sort of just summary. Right? Itinerary is just from the beginning and end destination. You can have a couple flights, and flights can have multiple flight legs. So crew scheduling is really all about getting the right aircraft and the right people from point A to point B. Right? That's what it's all about. All right, still review. Back in section one, I'm just going to encourage you to go back to section one. We went to a lot of detail about understanding the business vocabulary and why it's important, right? Because in most organizations, the business vocabulary, your terms and concepts, is pretty fuzzy. And it's a big part of our job as business analysts to make sure we kind of disambiguate those terms and concepts and get clarity on them. Because the things we want to know about, right, our terms and concepts tend to be pretty stable over time. The things we do, right, transactionally, tend to evolve very quickly and change over time. So getting our business data-oriented rules right, there's nothing technical. It's not a technical thing. It's just data-oriented business rules, right, that exist regardless of how they're actually implemented. All right, now in section part two, we talked about how to identify and analyze requirements. And I encourage you to go back to part two, where we talked about the interaction context diagrams, actors and interactions. Right? It's a technique for identifying requirements, right? And it's just a technique for identifying. That's all about engaging our subject matter experts. And once it could be done on a whiteboard, a flip chart. It's just a low fidelity artifact in Agile speak, right? But what we do is use it as a talking tool, and then we reduce that down to actual requirements. Scheduler creates a flight leg, an associate bids on trip, a dispatcher dispatches an aircraft, and these kinds of things. Then we say, okay, now once we understand our requirements, we have to analyze them. Remember the three components. We have to identify, analyze, and specify requirements. So we took it one more cut deeper. We just took one of our requirements, associate bids on trip. Right? We said, well, what does that mean to do a deeper analysis? The concept there is an interaction between a particular actor and a particular target system. And we're going to unfold what we call the activity sequence flow of events. Associate selects trip. The system deploys selection criteria and back and forth until we actually have been able to submit a bid. All right? And that's in detail back in part two. And then we, remember, identify, analyze, and specify. We specify requirements using a use case. I call it the use case specification. A use case is not an analysis tool. A use case is a technique for documenting or specifying a requirement. All right? So once we understand the requirement in detail, we can then specify it using the criteria of a use case. Okay, now part three, the first thing we want to do in part three, right, is we're going to talk about effectiveness and efficiency. Then we're going to talk a bit about how Southwest Air looks at effectiveness and efficiency. And in the last part of here, we're going to talk about the various critical scenarios during the meltdown. All right, but you got to understand these first few concepts first. Concept of effectiveness and efficiency. Now, I get to guest lecture at a number of graduate MBA programs, and one of the first things I ask is, somebody step up and make the distinction between effectiveness and efficiency. I think if you're spending 50, 75 grand a year on an MBA program, right, that should be like 101 kind of things they teach. But I get a wide range of responses to that. But let me kind of dial it down. I'll save you $150,000, and we can dial this down in about 2 minutes here. Effectiveness is about creating customer value. Now, that could be internal customers. It could be external customers. Many of us as business analysts, right, we're serving internal customers. But the organization has external customers. Full effectiveness is about creating value for our customers. Right? I'm going to talk about what that means in just a little bit. Or actually, we'll talk about it right now. Effectiveness comes down to 4 underlying questions. Right? I'm asking, right, who are my customers, internal or external? Right? Because if we're doing something, we're creating some type of work output of some kind, right? We have customers. So the first thing we're asking is, well, who are those customers that I'm supporting? And what are the products? What are the goods and services that we provide to our customers, right? Many of us provide services, particularly business analysts internally are providing services. Many of us are providing goods. Maybe we're on the technical side, we're building and configuring software, or maybe the organization itself is providing for external customers. What do my customers want from my products and service in terms of something called utility and warranty? And I'm going to look at that in just a second. Because the question is, what we're really asking here is, what creates value? What are they looking for out of those goods and services? And the fourth question is, what are they willing to pay for them, right? Now, maybe in terms of, you could have internal chargebacks or what your market prices that you're charging external customers. Often it's service level agreements. I'm going to be able to do this in a certain level of service, whatever it is. Well, what are they willing to pay? Now, that's important to understand that concept, because when we ask, what do our customers want? Well, they want everything, right? I want high quality output. I want it fast. I want great customer service. I want 24/7, support, all these kinds of things. The question is, well, that's cool. We can do that, but what you want to pay for to do that. So those things kind of counterbalance each other. Okay. So then, once we've identified effectiveness, what creates value, then and only then can we talk about efficiency. Because efficiency is creating value in the most economical manner. So once we've defined these parameters, right, my customers and what do I provide the customers, and we've established levels for quality and service and all these kinds of things, then only then I can ask the question, okay, given those things we've agreed to do, how can I do it in the most economical way? So efficiency is providing effectiveness in the most economical way. Now, the important distinction I want to make here is between efficiency and cost reduction. Those are different concepts. Both equally valid concepts, but they're different. Efficiency is about creating effectiveness at the predefined levels in the most economical manner. Cost reduction is lowering our levels of effectiveness in order to reduce the cost of doing business. Perfectly valid, because we could be operating at levels of effectiveness by which the customer doesn't recognize value in, so we can reduce them to reduce our cost of doing business. All right. Now, let's move on here. All right, so I said value really distills down to utility and warranty. All right. Now, utility, there's no like one silver bullet list of what utility and warranty is. It's just what it is for you and your customers and products and services. But the common ones are things like fit for use, fit for purpose. Does the product that I'm creating or the service that I'm providing, are they, is what the customer's looking for, right? Is to provide value in terms of doing what I need, or they're getting what they need out of it, right? That's fit for use. Sometimes configurability, right? Can they, particularly for goods, right? Can I configure it to do things in different ways and custom configure it to me, right? Flexibility, maybe in terms of ordering it, delivering it. What kind of flexibility are there? Quality. Now, quality is going to come up in both utility and warranty. But quality, what I mean in the context of utility, is styling, industrial design relative to the customer's needs and expectations. Like in automobiles, you can't say that a styling of a Mercedes whatever versus maybe a Ford low-end car. You can't say one's better than the other. It's relative to your needs and expectations. Based on a particular customer and the types of things they're looking for, the styling of a high-end automobile, right, is what it is to them. And if somebody's looking for more of an economic or economy automobile, there's styling that's relevant to that, right? But what does that styling mean to you? So we get utility out of styling, perhaps. Well, let's see what else we have to talk about here. We have warranty. right? Warranty based, so utility basically says, does the product, the good or service, does it provide what I need for me and my use? Warranty says, does the darn thing work? Right? In other words, you could have great utility, but if it doesn't work or if I'm not getting great service, it's probably not a good value to me, right? So some of the dimensions of warranty are customer service and support, right? Does it have great self-service support? Can I get a hold of a customer service rep or agent if I need to? If I get a hold of that customer in a timely manner, are they knowledgeable? All right, can they solve my problem? Right? Those are real important to customers, right? The overall customer experience, customer journey, right? The overall experience I have in interacting with the organization, the journey, particularly in things like complex software implementation. We move from more certain modules, more complexity, and things like that. Quality. Here, quality means. This means styling. This means things like reliability, right? Yeah, I could have a particular machine, and it does everything I could possibly want, and it has great customer service when it breaks down, but it breaks down a lot. Okay, so even though it has great customer service when it breaks down, but it breaks down a lot, right? Well, that's what I'm talking about: reliability, uptime, maintainability. Is it highly maintenance intensive? Do I have to continually take it out of service and do certain things to it? Safety and security. Right, things like the lithium-ion battery fires. Great. It's a great battery. It works. It does whatever you need to do. It's all that kind of things. But maybe sometimes it, burns my device down. All right. Interesting enough, in the airline business, we'll see that in just a second. Flight safety is the number one dimension in the passenger airline. Well, actually, any airline business, right? So it varies by product, service, organization, these kinds of things. What I'd like to do is we're going to just pause here. Well, I'm going to keep the video running here. But what I'd like you to do, just, you're doing it on your own. Nobody's looking over your shoulder. But think about this a little bit. For the work you do in your particular organization, right, who are your customers? Right? And what are you doing for those customers? What are the services you're providing? Or what are the goods that you're providing for that particular customer? If you're asking your customer, what do they want in terms of utility and warranty? What's the functionality they're looking for? What's the utility they're looking for, right? And then for the purpose of this, because we're only taking a few seconds here, don't have to worry about what they're willing to pay for. But if you could just identify these three things, that would be something just to, again, take 30 seconds. I'll let the video keep running. It'll give you context for thinking about what we're going to talk about in the next slide. Okay, that's about 30 seconds. That'll give you some context. So let's move on. The next thing we want to talk about here. Second thing in part 3 here is we call the Southwest Airlines Effectiveness and Efficiency Triad. All right. And I did some research, found this in a particular article. It's really based on effectiveness and efficiency. This is just how they think about it at Southwest Airlines. They have a triangle, and at the pinnacle of that triangle is safety. Right? Every decision that's made, first question that they ask is, what is the impact on flight safety, right? Because if flight safety isn't solid, nothing else really matters, right? The other part of the triad is the concept of reliability of the flight schedule, right? Can I count on that particular flight taking off on time and arriving, reasonably on time, and landing reasonably on time, right? And then the concept of low cost. Now, when they talk about low cost here, they're talking about efficiency of operations, right? Not low cost fares. Low cost fares is an important thing, but efficiency of their operations enable them to have low cost fares. All right, and then at the middle of this, hospitality. It basically says they want customers to have an amazing customer experience, whether you're dealing with a reservation agent on the phone, whether you're dealing with the gate agent, whether you're working with flight attendants on board. Hospitality is one of their driving things, right? Now think about it, just like we talked about before, it's the big E and the little e, effectiveness and efficiency, right? Flight safety, right, is an effectiveness thing. As a customer, I want an airline that has very high levels of flight safety. Reliability, that's a effectiveness thing. I want an airline that has a schedule that's highly reliable, that I can count on. Great example of that. I was going to go to a conference down in Cabo San Lucas a few weeks ago, and it ended on Sunday, midday, and I had to be at a client meeting, a very important client meeting on Monday morning, and I had to be there, right? And I really wanted to go to this conference too. But I said, based on what's going on, the flight delays and things like that, I just can't take the chance of not being able to get out on Sunday. So I didn't go to the conference because I had low confidence in the reliability of flight schedules. And it proved itself out, right? Because I checked the schedule. That flight ultimately was running 4 hours late, and they ultimately canceled it. Right, I wouldn't have been able to get back, in time for the meeting. I made a good call there. But the point is, reliability, very, very important, right? That's a dimension of effectiveness to me as safety, and low cost is cost of operations, right? I don't see that directly, but they're very efficient in their operations, right? In other words, they're operating more economically, and the more economically the airline can operate, right, the better fares they can offer because of the economics of operations. All right, so safety, reliability, and low cost. That's effectiveness, that's efficiency. And hospitality is effectiveness as well. I'm having a great customer experience, all right, along the way. I think Southwest Airlines does a good job, very excellent job of these, except for 2 weeks in December and the 1st of February. My point, though, is this is like culturally infused into everybody, in operations, in cabin crews, flight crews, gate crews. It's infused everywhere in the Southwest Airline organization, enterprise-wide. Let's think about flight safety. Let's think about reliability. Let's operate economically, and let's have a lot of hospitality, create a great customer experience, the best we can for our customers. And they create a lot of value, internally and externally, customer value and business value, by achieving these particular dimensions. All right. So some context here before we actually get into the meltdown. So business systems and business processes. Business systems support business process. If the business systems are underperforming during periods of stress, the business processes, right, supported by those systems underperform. So what are the procedures that come into play when processes underperform? We're going to talk about that a little bit, right? Everything works well until it doesn't, okay? Let's talk about a couple other things. Complexity, tighter coupling, and conservation of risk. Let me start off with conservation of risk. The concept of conservation of risk basically says that, well, actually, let me use a concrete example and illustrates the point. A number of years ago, many years ago, we went from standard brakes to anti-lock brakes. And anti-lock brakes were a major boom to the concept of car safety, right? Anti-lock brakes, if you slam on your brakes, maybe it's in wet conditions, it senses the tires locking out, and it keeps them just right before lockout. The point is you get the maximum amount of stopping power using anti-lock kind of technology, right? Amazing, right? However, over many, many, many years, right, of data, find that even though anti-lock brakes are an amazing technology, they work fine, the number of accidents fundamentally didn't decrease that much. Because what happens is people are willing to absorb a certain level of risk. So even though you have new technologies like anti-lock brakes, people just drive a little more aggressively. It's still the same level of risk, but we have better technology that allows us to drive a little more aggressively. That's the concept of conservation of risk. All right, now let me apply that to some thinking here. In the early days of Southwest Air, Herb Keller, and he was the founder of Southwest Airlines, he targeted what's called a load factor of 75%. Now what that means is a load factor of 75, or a load factor says when that plane takes off, what percentage of the seats are filled. And he targeted 75%. Now, the reason he targeted 75%, you got to go back, I don't know how long, Southwest Airlines has been around for 30 plus years, I'm sure. Technology was different, right? Processes, technology, scheduling, all that was different. So by targeting 75% load factor, That allowed slack in the system for delays and things like that, and to be able to accommodate passengers and do different things. And just that was his target rate, right? Based on the processes and technologies at that time. Today, the target rate for load factor is 75%, right? I mean 100%, right? Because better systems, better processes, we have a much more tightly coupled system, right? The plane, the turnarounds of those planes faster. Things. When a plane lands, it turns around and goes somewhere else. You get the concept, right? So it's a much more tightly coupled overall network of systems and processes. So what means is there's no slack anymore. Everything has to be operating at optimal conditions to maintain the flight schedule. So what happens when it's tightly coupled and you get some glitches along the way, things start rippling. And you get more glitches and things start rippling, and the more rippling, and you get the concept, and then you have the concept of the schedule melting down. Now, I'm not advocating going back to a 75% load factor. I'm just saying 100% is an amazing thing in terms of effectiveness and efficiency, all those kinds of things. But things have to work, right? And you have to have procedure for things to be that tightly coupled. So my point is, as a business ecosystem becomes increasingly complex and tightly coupled, an organization's business systems and business process must be highly functional, highly resilient, right? What did we see, right? Kind of in the COVID years, right? The supply chains started breaking down. Prior to COVID, and still now, supply chains, just-in-time inventory works. That was the place. Things were extremely tightly coupled. So we started getting little ripples, right? Glitches in the supply chains. Right, they started breaking down, and it broke down, and we ended up with and we're still recovering from significant supply chain issues. All right, that's a little context there for now to have the next discussion here. All right, so we talked about the triad: safety, reliability, low cost, and hospitality. I think it's at Love Field. I'm not sure, but I think their network operating, and it's an amazing place. Their network operating center. I mean, that is the nerve center of any airline. This just happens to be Southwest Airlines, and that's where they're dispatching aircrafts, and they're making flight changes and canceling or delaying, and all the kinds of things that happen hour to hour, minute to minute in an airline are managed by the network operating system. The network, what do they call it? The Network Operations Center. Yeah, that's the NOC, Network Operations Center. Okay, so now let's talk about a scenario here that happened in late December, early January. The severity of winter storm is increasing, right? Now, there's no mystery there, right? In the NOC, they have all kinds of weather information coming in, right? They probably subscribe to all kinds of national weather feeds and all kinds of weather feeds and all kinds of things. They're pulling real-time data off the planes. They're looking at humidity and airspeeds and all the information you could possibly want. They're pulling off the devices on the airplanes and looking at them. So the fact that it wasn't a big surprise that a winter storm was building and coming in. Okay, for sure. All right. So the severity of winter storm is increasing or predicted to increase at various origin and destination airports, resulting in staffing issues. Right? And what I mean by staffing issues here, maybe in let's just use Chicago Midway Airport, right? Everybody's in terms of weather, everybody thinks about Chicago, right? But associate cancellations late due to weather. The fact that 2 feet of snow dropped, right, in Chicago. I mean, there's people that well-meaning people, really dedicated people, they just couldn't get out of their driveway. Or maybe it took them 2 hours to shovel out of the driveway and get onto maybe a road to get to a road, right? So there were staffing issues of people just getting to the airport, right? Pilots and flight attendants over or near duty limits, right? Because they're flying, something gets delayed. They have, instead of a 30-minute turnover, now it's a turnaround. There's an hour and a half turnaround. Maybe on this particular leg, if they had left 30 minutes earlier, you'd still be at your duty cycle, but now it's an hour and a half. It would put you past your duty cycle, and according to regulations, you can't schedule somebody that's going to go. You get the concept right there. Increased time for ramp crews to service an aircraft, fuel, luggage, food and beverage, right? I was reading an article about the ramp crews, right? The people that actually, are luggage handlers, right? Well, when it's 10 below zero, they can only be by regulatory out on the ramp for just a certain amount of time before they have to come back and warm up a little bit. Well, the fact that that's happening is same with fuel people and all those kinds of people, right? They have less time spent because of those conditions, right? Increased time to de-ice aircraft. Now you have gate congestion, right? Planes can't get off the gate. Planes that are landed can't get to the gate, right? Increased, I should say, aircraft maintenance issues, right? Certain things happen in cold weather and you got to restock certain things. So the objective, right, is to optimize effectiveness and efficiency, right? The big E and the little e. Effectiveness creates value. Efficiency is about being the most economical you can, right? So what are the things you can do as weather's deteriorating or maybe even faster than you thought it was going to deteriorate? Well, one of the things it's called thinning out the flight schedule, which is a nice way of saying we're going to cancel flights. And what you generally want to do at the origin leg of a particular flight, you'd rather, right, to maximize the big E and the little e. And if you know that flight and a flight leg downstream is probably going to be delayed by hours or could be canceled, better off just canceling the entire flight at the beginning so the people that board the flight, they don't board, you're better off staying at home rather than get stranded en route, right? We could adjust the flight leg schedule, right? The concept is maybe we stretch them out a little bit more. Things get a little late, but now with the flight leg and these kinds of things, we can alter when it goes and how it goes and things like that. Increase on-call pilots and flight attendants, right? They always have pilots and flight attendants that are on call in case they come up short, right? The staffing issues. So maybe in advance, we increase the number of people that are on call. Increase the level of gate and ramp staffing, right? Because if I have baggage handlers and they can only work at maybe 60% capacity, maybe I want to have more baggage handlers, on that particular shift. So as one group comes off for a 15-minute break to get out of the cold weather, another one can come out and things like that. And again, I'm not an expert in what goes on in the NOC, but there's probably 1,000 other things you could do as well. So what did the Baker team do? Now, in an article I read, there's this team, it's kind of a team within the NOC, within the Network Operating Center called the Baker team. Now, the Baker team was named after a gentleman, I don't remember his first name, but Baker, that was really knowledgeable. He put a team together, this is going back 20, 30 years, of really knowledgeable dispatchers and schedulers and all kinds of people together, created kind of a sub-team within they have a lot of experience. And they were not only have incredible amount of experience, they were also empowered to make tactical decisions on their own without having to go, up the chain of command. All right. So, and the Baker team still exists. So it used to be, get Baker and his team together. Right now, it's just called the Baker team, and it still exists according to these articles. And it's they're in the NOC, and they spin up the Baker team when things start going chaotic. Right. And so whatever it is, they probably have a tool bag. I bet they have 100, 200 things they can do in their little tool bag. But here's what I think happened, right? Based on all my research, is that the systems work when they work and the processes work when they work. But this thing that happened in late December, early January, overran not only the processes and the systems, it even overran the Baker team being able to make real-time things to tweak the system. It just overran it, right? And so what I read in one article, instead of trying to schedule off the system, they'd go down to the pilot's lounge, right? Or the flight says, hey, who's eligible to fly this aircraft on this particular leg and wants to fly it and things like that. It got that crazy, and then they go back and fill in things like that. So it happens. Now the question is, at a deeper root cause, is what happened in late December, early January. Is that a kind of a one-off thing, right? Or is it something that could be a recurring thing? Is it a one-off thing, or could it, if we had new, better, more modernized integrated systems, which my understanding is Southwest Airlines has more legacy, older systems, they're not well integrated. And so if we had a more integrated enterprise system and the processes built around that, could it have handled it? I don't know, but it'd be worth looking into. So where I'm going with that is sometimes, even though they caught a lot of grief from that, the question is how one-off that thing. I mean, if it happens once every 5 years, that's one thing. If it's happening more frequently, that has a huge impact, right, on customers' expectations in terms of certainly reliability and other things as well. All right, so that would be something to investigate. Are the systems able to, going all the way back to better requirements, support better business systems, support better business processes, create more value? I think that's something that's worthy of a deeper discussion. Okay, so got a lot. Again, I come back to all these things we've talked about. We have our series of business process classes, our courses, our systems analysis courses, our soft skill, power skill kind of courses. Go to the website, inteqgroup.com/training, and take a look. We have a whole great offering of training there. Okay, well, thanks for attending. That wraps up part 3. And if you like what you have and seen here and there's some good value, go ahead and recommend that, if you would, to your friends and colleagues. All they have to do is go to, they can register. They'll get access to the videos. They'll get access to the handouts at inteqgroup.com/I love Southwest Airlines, ILUV SWA. Okay, part 3, we're out. I'm out. See you soon. Bye-bye.